First of all, the national movement or the independentist movement has existed for the last 40 years. So in 1978, let's say, when we had the constitution, there was a few people, but they existed then, that they were against constitution because the constitution was not recognizing fundamental rights. But the last years, we can say that the movement or the Catalan society had moved to the left. The Catalan society had always defended some progressive values. In the 80s, 90s, the main movement for the international solidarity in Spain was in Catalonia. The main demonstration against war in 2003, when the Iraqi invasion was in Barcelona. In 2017, the main demonstration for refugees, it was in Barcelona. So we had always defended this kind of values or rights. The last years, what we can say is that the democratic movement, because what we defend is the right to vote, the right to decide ourselves, had shown the basis of the regime of the Spanish state. So this is why we can say that the Catalan movement had moved to the left, because we are defending democratic rights against those who are just denying it. So that's for sure that we have some nationalistic or nationalistic people in the independentist movement. Yes, we cannot say that we don't have it, but the majority, it's not the typical or the classical nationalistic movement as we can see in the rest of Europe, that they are defending a right-wing position. So this is why we say we are more leftist than rightists, but for sure most of the movement is not an anti-capitalist movement, but some of the things we are winning it, so that's the main thing. The way of gaining our rights, it's just to exercise our rights. And I think that this is the more radical thing that we can have. It's just, okay, we are not demanding, or we can demand for rights, but when we are sure that these rights are basic rights or fundamental rights, and the power is not respecting it or answering to this demand, the best way to have these rights is just to exercise, and this is why the Catalan society has radicalized. Most of the Catalan people had always looked to the European Union as a way of, or as a space that defend fundamental rights. And what they had seen is that the European Union is just defending the rights of the states, not of people. So I remember that before the 1st of October 2017, most of people said, okay, if the Spanish state is not answering to this, the European Union will just force them, or they will just be with us. Some months later, people were saying, okay, where is Europe? Europe is not answering against the brutal repression, it's not answering against the denial of fundamental right as a, no. And it's just okay, because the European Union as an institution, they are, or is protecting the states, not the people from the states. This can bring more violence, yes. The violence the state is using to stop people. We cannot say that the Catalan movement is a violent movement. It's just responding to what the Spanish state is doing. And as you said, we have seen it always. The response to the Basque movement was this one. I'm just saying that everyone that was being in the Basque movement were just ETA, and was just there were things that were completely different. There were the political parties, magazines, newspapers. The Lawyers Association was also in a trial a few months ago. So we have seen this with the Basque movement, and now we have seen it with the Catalan movement. We always remember that a few years ago, the Spanish state with the Basque movement was saying, okay, without violence we can talk about everything. We saw in 2017 that this was not true, because without violence we couldn't talk about the self-determination right. So it's not true that we can talk about everything. We can talk about the things that the state decides that are not against the unity of Spain. These are the only things that we can talk about. So to talk about the right of self-determination, to talk about fundamental rights, freedom of expression, all this we cannot talk about. So this is where we had, or the way to see the basis with the ones that the Spanish state had been founded in 1978, with a transition that was not a transition, it was a transaction with the elites. Yes, for sure, we can say that the Franco establishment, or it's in the justice system, in the economical system also, most of the main transnational or enterprise companies were founded during the dictatorship. So, as the main Florentino Pérez, the main banks, Banco Santander, they were founded during the dictatorship, and they are still having the power, or the economical power, in the Spanish state. So with all this we can say that we had no transition. So the Franco system is in the roots of this democratic state that we are facing now. And with Vox, what we could see is that Vox is not new, because Vox was with the Popular Party. So it's just a decision, or a new political party coming from Popular Party, and it's the way that the system has to move to the right. So with Vox there, everyone is moving to the right just for saying, okay, we are afraid of Vox, so we need to be more in the center, or we need to be more in the right, just to not let them win more. But we have seen that with this, they are increasing more the support that they have. So this is not the way, but it's a way, or it's the path that the system decided that they have just to maintain the status quo, so they maintain the unity of Spain. I think that we still don't know exactly where the police or the Spanish state wants to arrive. But since this August, we can say, what we have seen, or the more visible thing, was the repression against the political prisoners, the ones that the Catalan government, or some of the leaders of the civil society. But this was the things that were most visible. But with some of people that are in the popular movement. We have seen 1 year and a half ago, but for sure this September, that the Spanish state used the most repressive way. In September, they put in preventive prison 7 people coming from the popular movement, 7 CDR, the committees that are organizing the mobilizations or the main mobilizations here in Catalonia, accusing them of terrorism, saying that they had explosive in their home, but we couldn't see anything of this. And what we have is that they have some conversations that they had talking about that maybe one day they will just make some actions against some bridges or some, I don't know how to say, stations of electricity. That this is sabotage, but not anything else. They are put in prison. They are isolated now in prison after more than 2 months. They are in isolation, and the justice, one of the tribunals that is coming from the Franco system is investigating this movement, but also everything that seems to be organized for mobilization. They are investigating for terrorism. So what we can see is that most of the people that is going to mobilizations or just saying anything about mobilizations can be arrested for this. So the preventions that we have when we talk, when we have meetings, are totally. So we know that we cannot have some conversations by phone. We know that we need to have some meetings in some specific places, or that we cannot have it in some specific places. For example, as political party, we know that there are some things that are not related with terrorism, that are just these discussions about the next mobilization. We cannot do it here in our place because we are not sure here. We don't know if there will be police outside just trying to listen, so that they use a simple word just to write a fantastical story, a novel, let's say, about what we want to do. We can connect the rise of the feminist movement with the Catalan movement. That's for sure. That the feminist movement, or the rise of feminist movement, is not only that happening in Catalonia. It's all around the world. But the fact that the Catalan movement started to discuss with the status quo has facilitated that all the movements that are discussing the status quo are just going with this movement. So the Catalan movement is seeing all the movements that are like this, discussing the power, discussing the status quo, discussing the regime, as a movements that are friend movements. So that it's just okay, if the feminist movement is discussing the power of, or the patriarchate, or the Spanish state as a patriarchal state, so maybe that's because they are right. So we need to bring some of their main demands on the movement. That happened with the feminist movement, also with the refugees movement, with all these kind of movements that are trying to move the roots of the system, that the Catalan movement is just bringing with them. Let's say the independentist movement, or the left independentist movement, has been always a feminist movement. So we can say that somehow the hegemony, that it's not that we have the hegemony of the movement, but we managed to put some of the things there. Left independentist movement, we had always looked as Greek people during the fight with, let's say, the European Union and the Central Bank and the Troika, as an example of fight. Let's say that after the referendum in 2015, things changed, but it's just okay. The left movement in Europe, I think that we were not with the Greek people at that moment. So and for us, it's just okay. At that moment, the Greek people were just defending their sovereignty, the right that they had just to manage by themselves. And what we ask is exactly the same thing. We want to manage by ourselves as a way of regaining the sovereignty, but not in a nationalistic way that it's Catalonia against Spain. No, it's just it's a way of the people could manage against the basis of a state that is not defending the fundamental rights, the right, not only the self-determination right, but also the right of having a job, or the right of having a place to live and that we can pay. It's all of this that we are defending and demanding.